An undercover CEO walks into his own store, disguised as just another employee, but what he uncovers shocks him to his core. A hardworking black cashier, exhausted and on the verge of breaking, stands at the register, hiding her pain behind a forced smile. As he watches her struggle, he begins to question everything he thought he knew about his company. What has happened to the once thriving store he built? And what will it take to restore the dignity of those working under his roof? Prepare for a journey of power, redemption, and a fight for fairness. Nia Johnson stood behind the checkout counter, her fingers trembling as she scanned a bottle of shampoo. Her movements were mechanical, practiced. She had long ago perfected the art of functioning on autopilot. But today, as she looked down at the price tag and pressed the button to confirm the total, something in her chest tightened. She was tired. So tired. The soft hum of the store's overhead lights did little to ease the heaviness that weighed on her. Riverdale Market had always been her second home. She had been with the store for over 5 years, moving from part-time cashier to full-time as her son, Elijah, got older. It had been a steady job, one she had taken pride in. But lately, the once vibrant atmosphere of the store had begun to change. The smiles that had once greeted customers were now replaced with weary faces and forced politeness. Employees no longer laughed in the break room or exchanged pleasantries on the floor. The energy was stifled, suffocating. Nia didn't need to ask why. She could feel it in her bones. Vernon, the store manager, had changed everything. When he first took the position, Nia had hoped for a fresh perspective, a chance to improve the store's operations. But what she had gotten instead was a manager who saw people as numbers, just figures on a spreadsheet to be reduced or increased at will. Hours were cut, staff were overworked, and those who questioned the new rules were met with disdain. Vernon had no patience for people who couldn't keep up with the fast pace he demanded. And Nia, with her need to take time off when Elijah was sick, had quickly become one of his targets. Her shifts were slashed without warning. There were days when she barely managed to cover rent, let alone pay for her son's medication. She had been forced to take Elijah to doctor's appointments alone, even when she knew she couldn't afford to miss the hours at work. But what was she supposed to do? Vernon didn't care about her life outside the store. Her personal circumstances, her son's asthma attacks, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the bottom line. It was all too much, but Nia didn't show it. She couldn't. She had learned to mask her pain, her exhaustion, with a smile that was starting to feel more like a mask than anything genuine. She wasn't sure when she had last felt the warmth of a real smile, one that came from inside. It had been too long since she had felt like she could breathe. Nia's hands trembled slightly as she passed a customer their receipt, but she quickly tucked her hands under the counter, hiding the weakness she could no longer deny. She had to hold it together. She had to keep moving forward. For Elijah. For herself. She couldn't afford a break. Not now. Not with everything riding on this job. The store around her was no better. Shelves that once gleamed with fresh produce were now only half-stocked. Promotional signs hung crookedly, and empty aisles were left untouched. Nia's heart sank as she saw the fading image of Riverdale Market, once a proud community hub, now a shell of its former self. The chaos in the aisles mirrored what was happening inside her own chest, a mess of stress, guilt, and fatigue. And still she smiled, not because she felt like it, but because she had no other choice. Her boss's words echoed in her mind. If you can't keep up, there are plenty of people who can. She had heard that 1,000 times, but each time it hit harder. Every day she came in, she put on a mask, walked to the register, and pretended everything was fine. But inside, she was barely holding on. There were moments when she felt like a failure. She wasn't sure if it was the weight of the job or the constant pressure of being a mother alone, but the strain was starting to show. Elijah deserved more. He deserved a mother who wasn't constantly worn out, constantly running on fumes. But how could she be everything for him when she could barely keep up at work? The days bled into one another, each one feeling like the last. She was so tired, but there was no time for rest. Vernon's demands were relentless. Why are you standing there? Move faster. He would bark if she so much as paused. The words stung, but she swallowed them down, just as she swallowed the tears that threatened to spill over. She couldn't let anyone see how badly she was struggling. As the shift wore on, Nia's gaze drifted to the break room, where a group of employees sat in silence. They didn't laugh anymore, didn't joke the way they used to. Everyone was too tired, too beaten down by the never-ending demands. Nia could see it in their eyes, just like she could see it in her own reflection. No one cared anymore. Not the customers. Not Vernon. And worst of all, she wasn't sure if she cared, either. But she couldn't give up. She wouldn't. She had a son who needed her, even if she couldn't quite take care of herself. And so, as the clock ticked closer to the end of her shift, Nia adjusted her uniform, forced another smile onto her face, and kept moving. She would make it through this. She had to, because for all the exhaustion, the fear, and the frustration, there was still one thing left to fight for. And that was Elijah. Marcus Rivers had always prided himself on his ability to stay connected with his stores. As the founder and CEO of Riverdale Market, he had worked tirelessly to grow his company from a single location to a regional chain with several branches. He had built his business on the principles of respect and community, always maintaining an open-door policy for employees and valuing their contributions. But lately, something was off. Complaints had begun to pour in. Complaints about the store's atmosphere, the quality of customer service, and the general disarray that seemed to have taken over. At first, Marcus chalked it up to the growing pains of a larger operation. But as the complaints became more frequent, he could no longer ignore the unsettling feeling gnawing at him. Something had changed, and he needed to understand what was going wrong. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Marcus made a bold decision. He would go undercover. Disguising himself as a new employee, he would step into the store without anyone knowing who he was, so he could see for himself how the business was being run. His usual polished suit was replaced with a simple Riverdale Market uniform, and he adjusted his cap low over his eyes, blending into the background like just another worker. As he walked through the front doors of the store, Marcus was immediately struck by the heavy atmosphere. The store, which had once been a bustling hub of activity, now felt like a ghost town. Shelves that should have been stocked with fresh produce and products were half empty, and the promotional signs that had once been so vibrant now looked dull and forgotten. The lighting was dimmer than it should have been, and the aisles, which should have been filled with customers, were nearly empty. Marcus quietly observed from behind a row of shelves, trying not to draw attention to himself. He moved slowly through the aisles, taking in the silence that had settled over the store. The employees moved about in a robotic fashion, avoiding eye contact with customers and each other. There were no greetings, no small talk, no friendly exchanges. The employees simply went through the motions, their expressions blank and distant. It was a far cry from the energized, friendly store he had once been proud of. As he moved toward the checkout area, his eyes fell on Nia Johnson. She was behind the register, scanning items with a forced smile. Her movements were slow, almost mechanical, and there was a deep sadness in her eyes. Nia's body language told a story that her forced smile couldn't hide. She was exhausted. She was struggling, and Marcus could see it. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed over the receipt to a customer, her gaze flickering with a mixture of sadness and frustration. Her eyes were red, and despite her best efforts to maintain composure, Marcus could see that she was holding back tears. It wasn't the kind of sadness that came from just a bad day. It was a deep, overwhelming kind of exhaustion, as though she had been carrying a weight for far too long. Marcus's heart ached as he watched her. She wasn't just tired, she was broken. The weight of her responsibilities, her struggles at home, and the cruelty of her workplace had clearly taken a toll on her. He watched Nia interact with a few customers. Her smile never wavered, but Marcus could tell it was strained, as if it had become a routine she had mastered out of necessity rather than choice. She handed over the receipt to one customer, but when her eyes met his, he could see the pain beneath her facade. Nia wasn't just a cashier. She was a woman weighed down by far more than her job. Marcus continued to observe, silently cataloging the disarray and tension around him. The customers in the store were moving quickly, barely acknowledging the employees. There was no chatter, no warmth between staff and customers. Just a steady, silent march through the aisles. It wasn't just the physical state of the store that had deteriorated, it was the spirit of the place. The energy was gone. He wandered deeper into the aisles, moving past the refrigerated section, where the shelves were mostly empty, and then the bread aisle, which had only a few torn packages left. He could feel it now, the heaviness in the air. It wasn't just poor management or bad sales. It was something more. It was a team that had given up. Everyone, from the exhausted staff to the disillusioned customers, seemed to be going through the motions without any belief in what they were doing. The store was no longer a place of community. It was just a place to work, a place to get by. Marcus's thoughts were interrupted by Nia's voice as she spoke to another customer, her words shaky but polite. "Thank you for shopping with us. Have a good day," she said, but there was no warmth in her tone. She was doing what was expected of her, but it was clear she wasn't invested in it anymore. Her voice trembled slightly as she handed over the receipt, and her eyes quickly darted away from the customer. It was at that moment that Marcus realized the full extent of the problem. It wasn't just bad management. It was a systemic issue that went deeper. The employees were demoralized. They were broken, and the store had become a reflection of that. The sense of community, the values he had worked so hard to instill in his business, had been eroded. Marcus stood silently in the aisle, watching Nia as she continued to serve customers with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The realization hit him like a wave. His company had become a place that crushed the spirits of its workers rather than lifting them up. And Nia was the perfect example of how far things had fallen. He knew then that he couldn't let it continue. He couldn't walk away and pretend everything was fine. The Riverdale market he had built, the company that had once been a beacon of respect and fairness, was in trouble. It was time for change, and it had to start with him. Marcus's undercover observation continued for days, each passing moment revealing more about the troubling atmosphere at Riverdale Market. The store was a shell of what it once had been, and he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread with every passing hour. It wasn't just that the shelves were half empty or that customers walked through the aisles with barely a glance at the employees. It was deeper than that. Marcus noticed the way the employees moved, or rather, the way they didn't move. They shuffled from task to task with no energy, no enthusiasm. Their eyes were hollow, their shoulders slumped as though the weight of the store's failures rested on them, even though they had no control over what was happening. The store manager, Vernon, had turned the place into a pressure cooker, pushing everyone harder while simultaneously stripping them of the resources and support they needed to succeed. As Marcus observed, he saw Vernon's management style up close. He overheard heated conversations between Vernon and other employees, where hours were being reduced without warning or explanation. Schedules were manipulated, creating chaos for employees who were trying to make ends meet. The constant threat of retaliation loomed over anyone who spoke out or showed signs of resistance. Marcus could see the manipulation clearly now. Vernon wasn't interested in running a store that fostered a positive environment. He wasn't concerned with the welfare of his employees or the community they served. His only concern was maximizing profits at any cost. It was a culture of fear and exhaustion, where workers were treated as disposable. Marcus couldn't believe what he was seeing. He had built this company on the promise of mutual respect. Employees treated well would, in turn, treat customers well. But somewhere along the way, that promise had been abandoned. In its place stood a machine running on empty, crushing the very people who had made it successful. One afternoon, while Marcus was restocking shelves in the back corner of the store, he overheard a conversation in the break room. The door was slightly ajar, and the voices inside were low, but he could make out the words. His heart tightened as he heard the voice of Nia, the cashier he had noticed earlier, speaking in a broken, tremulous tone. "I don't know what to do anymore," Nia said, her voice cracking. "Elijah's asthma has been getting worse. I had to take time off last week, and now they've cut my hours again. Vernon doesn't care. He told me I'm unreliable. I'm barely making enough to get by. The words cut into Marcus like a knife. Nia was already struggling to balance her job and her responsibilities as a single mother. She was doing her best, but it wasn't enough. The emotional and financial strain was beginning to suffocate her. He said I should be more dependable. Nia continued. I told him about Elijah's condition, but he didn't care. He just told me to stop making excuses. I don't know how I'm going to make rent this month, and I'm scared to ask for any time off because I know he'll just punish me more. Marcus's heart sank. He had been aware of the systemic issues plaguing the store, but hearing Nia's story firsthand was like hearing the full weight of the problem laid bare. The store's toxic culture wasn't just affecting the business. It was directly hurting the lives of the people who worked there. Nia wasn't the only one suffering. Marcus knew that Vernon's oppressive tactics had created a ripple effect, damaging the entire workforce, breaking their spirits, and robbing them of their dignity. Nia's sobs were soft but unmistakable. Marcus didn't know how long he stood there, listening, but each word she spoke hit him harder than the last. Nia wasn't just an employee. She was a mother fighting to keep her family afloat. She was giving everything she had, and yet the system was stripping away her ability to do even that. Her tears were a direct result of the broken system Vernon had created, a system that punished workers for things beyond their control. The thought of it made Marcus feel sick to his stomach. He wanted to walk in, to show her that he cared, to tell her that things would change. But he stayed frozen, unsure of what he could do at that moment. The damage had been done, and it was more than just Nia's hours being cut. It was her spirit, her trust in the company, that had been shattered. He realized now that he wasn't just seeing a store in decline. He was seeing a community of workers that had been crushed under the weight of poor leadership. After a long pause, the conversation in the break room quieted, and Marcus moved quickly to avoid detection. His mind was racing with thoughts of what to do next. He couldn't let this continue. It was clear to him now that the problem wasn't just Vernon. It was a culture that had allowed Vernon to thrive. And the first step toward fixing it would be to address the root cause of the issue, the toxic leadership that was poisoning Riverdale Market from the inside out. Nia had been right all along. The system wasn't just failing her, it was failing everyone. Marcus was done ignoring the signs. He had seen enough, and now he knew what he had to do. The moment Marcus delivered the news to Nia, it felt like time itself had frozen. She stood at the front of the store, her eyes wide with disbelief, trying to process what he had just said. Marcus had pulled her aside, away from the rest of the staff, after Vernon had been escorted out. His voice was calm, but there was a certain warmth in it that Nia wasn't used to hearing from anyone at work. "Nia," he said, looking her straight in the eye, "I've been watching you. I've seen the way you handle yourself, even under the pressure you've been dealing with. You're stronger than most people give you credit for. I'm offering you the role of assistant manager." For a moment, Nia was frozen. The words felt unreal. She had spent so long just trying to make it through each shift, managing the weight of her responsibilities as a mother while enduring the mistreatment from her boss. To think that Marcus, the CEO of Riverdale Market, was offering her a leadership role was beyond her wildest dreams. Her breath caught in her throat. "Wait." She finally managed to whisper, unsure she had heard him correctly. Marcus smiled, nodding. "You've earned it. You've shown more resilience than I've seen in a long time. You understand the struggles of this team, and I believe you're the one who can lead them in a way that honors the values we've always believed in. You've got the trust of the people here, Nia. It's time we put that trust to use." Tears welled up in Nia's eyes, but she blinked them away, quickly trying to regain her composure. This was something she had never expected, not in her wildest dreams. She had always felt invisible, as though no one cared about the effort she put in day after day. But here was Marcus, a man who had seen beyond the surface, beyond her exhaustion and her struggles, and had recognized her worth. "Thank you," Nia said softly, her voice shaky but filled with gratitude. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything, Nia," Marcus replied gently. "You've already proven everything you need to. This is yours. It's time we start treating our employees like they matter." Her heart pounded in her chest. She had been fighting so hard to keep it all together, to show up for her son and for her job. But now, in this moment, Nia felt as though something had shifted. She wasn't just a cashier anymore. She was someone who could make a real difference. The days that followed were a blur of new responsibility, but Nia dove into the role with a newfound sense of purpose. Her first task was to address the scheduling system. She knew it was one of the root causes of the store's problems. Employees were constantly juggling conflicting shifts, personal responsibilities, and the fear of being penalized for asking for time off. She wasn't going to let that continue. Nia sat down with the other employees, taking the time to listen to their concerns. She heard about the lack of flexibility, the struggles with childcare, and the frustrations of being unable to make plans outside of work because of erratic schedules. She made notes, knowing that changes had to be made, and fast. The following week, Nia presented her new scheduling system to Marcus. It was designed with one key principle in mind: to prioritize the needs of the employees. The new plan ensured that no one was forced to choose between their job and their personal life. For the first time in months, the employees felt as though their well-being was being considered. Nia's approach was compassionate, realistic, and based on mutual respect. When a new schedule was implemented, the atmosphere in the store began to shift. Employees began to arrive to work with a renewed sense of purpose, a glimmer of hope in their eyes. Nia's leadership, rooted in empathy and understanding, set the tone for the store's new culture. She wasn't just a boss. She was a leader who truly cared about the people she worked with. Soon, the store began to feel different. The energy that had once been drained from the employees started to return. There was more laughter in the break room, more conversation on the floor, and customers noticed the change as well. The staff no longer seemed robotic or exhausted. They were engaging with customers, offering help, and smiling again. Nia took a walk through the aisles one afternoon, a small but genuine smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. She had worked so hard to reach this point, and now things were beginning to fall into place. Her decision to step up had changed everything, not just for her but for the entire team. As she passed by the dairy section, Marcus came over to her, his eyes filled with quiet admiration. "You've done it, Nia," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "You've turned this store around. I knew I made the right decision by giving you this opportunity." Nia glanced at the employees around her, working with energy, engaging with customers, and carrying themselves with pride. She had done this. She had brought life back to Riverdale Market, and in doing so, she had reclaimed a sense of worth she hadn't realized she had lost. "It's not just me, Marcus," she replied, her voice steady with newfound confidence. "It's the whole team. We're in this together." Marcus nodded. "That's exactly what I meant. It's your leadership that has brought this store back to life, and it's only going to get better from here." As Nia walked back to the front, she knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. The store was healing, and so was she. The moment Marcus delivered the news to Nia, it felt like time itself had frozen. She stood at the front of the store, her eyes wide with disbelief, trying to process what he had just said. Marcus had pulled her aside, away from the rest of the staff, after Vernon had been escorted out. His voice was calm, but there was a certain warmth in it that Nia wasn't used to hearing from anyone at work. "Nia," he said, looking her straight in the eye, "I've been watching you. I've seen the way you handle yourself, even under the pressure you've been dealing with. You're stronger than most people give you credit for. I'm offering you the role of assistant manager." For a moment, Nia was frozen. The words felt unreal. She had spent so long just trying to make it through each shift, managing the weight of her responsibilities as a mother while enduring the mistreatment from her boss. To think that Marcus, the CEO of Riverdale Market, was offering her a leadership role was beyond her wildest dreams. Her breath caught in her throat. "Wait," she finally managed to whisper, unsure she had heard him correctly. Marcus smiled, nodding. "You've earned it. You've shown more resilience than I've seen in a long time. You understand the struggles of this team, and I believe you're the one who can lead them in a way that honors the values we've always believed in. You've got the trust of the people here, Nia. It's time we put that trust to use." Tears welled up in Nia's eyes, but she blinked them away, quickly trying to regain her composure. This was something she had never expected, not in her wildest dreams. She had always felt invisible, as though no one cared about the effort she put in day after day. But here was Marcus, a man who had seen beyond the surface, beyond her exhaustion and her struggles, and had recognized her worth. "Thank you," Nia said softly, her voice shaky but filled with gratitude. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything, Nia," Marcus replied gently. "You've already proven everything you need to. This is yours. It's time we start treating our employees like they matter." Her heart pounded in her chest. She had been fighting so hard to keep it all together, to show up for her son and for her job. But now, in this moment, Nia felt as though something had shifted. She wasn't just a cashier anymore. She was someone who could make a real difference. The days that followed were a blur of new responsibility, but Nia dove into the role with a newfound sense of purpose. Her first task was to address the scheduling system. She knew it was one of the root causes of the store's problems. Employees were constantly juggling conflicting shifts, personal responsibilities, and the fear of being penalized for asking for time off. She wasn't going to let that continue. Nia sat down with the other employees, taking the time to listen to their concerns. She heard about the lack of flexibility, the struggles with childcare, and the frustrations of being unable to make plans outside of work because of erratic schedules. She made notes, knowing that changes had to be made, and fast. The following week, Nia presented her new scheduling system to Marcus. It was designed with one key principle in mind: to prioritize the needs of the employees. The new plan ensured that no one was forced to choose between their job and their personal life. For the first time in months, the employees felt as though their well-being was being considered. Nia's approach was compassionate, realistic, and based on mutual respect. When a new schedule was implemented, the atmosphere in the store began to shift. Employees began to arrive to work with a renewed sense of purpose, a glimmer of hope in their eyes. Nia's leadership, rooted in empathy and understanding, set the tone for the store's new culture. She wasn't just a boss. She was a leader who truly cared about the people she worked with. Soon, the store began to feel different. The energy that had once been drained from the employees started to return. There was more laughter in the break room, more conversation on the floor, and customers noticed the change as well. The staff no longer seemed robotic or exhausted. They were engaging with customers, offering help, and smiling again. Nia took a walk through the aisles one afternoon, a small but genuine smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. She had worked so hard to reach this point, and now things were beginning to fall into place. Her decision to step up had changed everything, not just for her but for the entire team. As she passed by the dairy section, Marcus came over to her, his eyes filled with quiet admiration. "You've done it, Nia," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "You've turned this store around. I knew I made the right decision by giving you this opportunity." Nia glanced at the employees around her, working with energy, engaging with customers, and carrying themselves with pride. She had done this. She had brought life back to Riverdale Market, and in doing so, she had reclaimed a sense of worth she hadn't realized she had lost. "It's not just me, Marcus," she replied, her voice steady with newfound confidence. "It's the whole team. We're in this together." Marcus nodded. "That's exactly what I meant. It's your leadership that has brought this store back to life, and it's only going to get better from here." As Nia walked back to the front, she knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. The store was healing, and so was she. The weeks following Nia's promotion were marked by a subtle but undeniable shift in the atmosphere at Riverdale Market. The store, once dimmed by fear and exhaustion, began to hum with a different energy. Nia's leadership, grounded in empathy and fairness, slowly transformed the place from a lifeless, transactional space into a thriving, community-oriented hub once again. The road to recovery wasn't instant, but it was visible. Nia understood the importance of listening. It was a small thing, but she made it a priority to engage with each of her team members every day. She took time to speak with them during breaks, to ask how they were really doing, not just as employees, but as people with lives outside of work. Nia had been in their shoes, and she knew how it felt to be ignored, overlooked, or reduced to just a number. Her approach was simple: treat every person with respect, value their input, and show them that their hard work mattered. It was in these quiet conversations that the transformation truly began. Employees who had once kept their heads down and kept quiet started to open up. Their shoulders no longer slumped, and their movements became less robotic, more confident. They spoke about how grateful they were for the changes in the scheduling system, for the recognition of their struggles, and for the support they felt in their roles. No longer did they feel like just cogs in a machine. They felt like integral parts of the store's success. One afternoon, Nia overheard two employees, Marcus and Linda, talking in the break room. "Can you believe it?" Marcus asked, his voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and joy. "I actually had a day off that didn't get taken away at the last minute. I planned it, and it actually happened. No one's been messing with my hours." Linda smiled, her expression warmer than Nia had ever seen it. "And my kids are getting their needs met now that I'm not working 60 hours a week. I can actually be present at home without worrying about missing a shift." Nia stood at the door, listening to the conversation, her heart swelling with pride. She had heard stories like this more than once in recent weeks. How employees were beginning to take pride in their work again, how they were able to balance their lives and jobs in a way that hadn't been possible before. The store had come to life, and so had the people who worked there. Nia didn't take all the credit for the changes. It wasn't just her leadership. It was the efforts of the entire team that had contributed to this new atmosphere. But Nia's role as a leader was undeniable. She led by example, not through fear or intimidation, but with understanding and respect. She showed them that leadership could be about lifting others up, not pushing them down. The positive shift in culture also started to show in the customer's experience. The energy of the employees had an infectious effect, and customers noticed. They were greeted with warm smiles, genuine offers of help, and friendly conversations. The shelves that once sat half-stocked were now filled with fresh, neatly arranged products. The store was brighter, cleaner, and the customers could feel the difference. Even Vernon's old tactics had been erased from the store's practices. The weekly staff meetings were now opportunities for open dialogue, where employees could share concerns, offer suggestions, or simply talk about their lives. There were no more threats of retaliation for asking for time off or requesting flexible hours. Nia made sure everyone knew their voice mattered. One day, as Nia walked through the aisles, she saw Linda and another employee, Jorge, organizing the newly stocked produce section. The two of them were working together efficiently, laughing as they exchanged stories. A year ago, that kind of teamwork would have been impossible. Back then, employees kept to themselves, driven by the stress of an oppressive schedule and a lack of support. But now, they were working together in harmony, proud of their contributions, and the sense of camaraderie was palpable. As she moved to the front of the store, she saw Marcus at the checkout, helping a customer with a heavy cart. He was engaging with the customer, joking with him about the weather, and offering advice on the best products. Nia felt a sense of accomplishment well up inside her. Marcus had always been a hardworking employee, but now, as a result of the culture change, he was thriving. He had come out of his shell and was becoming a natural leader in his own right. Nia knew the transformation wasn't complete, and there would be challenges ahead. Rebuilding the store's reputation, maintaining the morale of the team, and ensuring that the culture remained intact would require constant effort. But for the first time in a long while, she felt confident about the future. The staff, once worn down and exhausted, were now working together to rebuild the foundation of Riverdale Market. The atmosphere had shifted from one of fear to one of respect. The store no longer felt like a place people came to simply clock in and out. It was a place of collaboration where everyone mattered. The employees were engaged, the customers felt valued, and Nia's leadership had become a symbol of how empathy and respect could turn a failing business into a thriving community. As Nia stood at the front of the store, watching the team in action, she knew one thing. They had done it. They had transformed Riverdale Market. And in doing so, she had transformed herself. From a cashier struggling to get by to a leader who had found her voice, her purpose, and her place within the company she had helped rebuild. Marcus stood outside Riverdale Market, looking at the building for the first time in weeks. The sign above the door seemed different now. More than just a logo, it was a symbol of renewal, of the changes that had begun within the store's walls. He had spent days reflecting on everything that had transpired, the decision to promote Nia, the firing of Vernon, the struggles and victories that had followed. He had seen the shift in the store's culture, but he hadn't fully grasped how deep the transformation ran until now. With a quiet exhale, Marcus pushed open the door and stepped inside. The first thing he noticed was the energy. The air felt different, lighter. The oppressive weight that had hung over the store for so long seemed to have lifted. As he walked through the aisles, he saw something he hadn't in a long time. Employees who were engaged, smiling, and speaking to customers with genuine enthusiasm. There were no longer stiff movements or blank stares. There was life here again. At the customer service counter, Marcus spotted Linda and Jorge laughing together, restocking shelves as they chatted. Marcus caught their eye, and they greeted him with warm smiles and a respectful nod. There was no awkwardness, no tension, just a team that had learned to work together and support one another. His eyes moved to the checkout lanes. Nia was behind the register, speaking with a customer and making them laugh. Her smile was effortless now, and her voice was warm. There was no strain in it, no forced politeness. She was confident, calm, and at ease in her role. She had settled into her leadership position with grace, commanding respect without the need for power or intimidation. She was exactly what the store needed. Marcus moved closer to the register, watching Nia interact with her team. She was guiding the newer employees with patience, offering them advice and checking in on their progress. When a young employee fumbled with the register, Nia gently showed him the correct steps, her tone reassuring and kind. It was a quiet leadership, one that spoke to her belief in the potential of others and her dedication to seeing them succeed. As Marcus continued through the store, he overheard snippets of conversations from the employees. They were discussing their plans for the weekend, asking each other for advice on cooking meals, sharing parenting tips. There was a sense of camaraderie that hadn't existed before. The employees no longer just showed up to work to clock in and out. They were part of a community. Marcus felt a sense of pride swell within him. He had seen it firsthand, the hard work that Nia had put in, the dedication she had shown her team, and how she had nurtured the store's culture back to life. He realized that the success of this transformation wasn't in the policies he had implemented or the changes he had enforced. It was in the way the employees had embraced the shift, how they had taken ownership of their roles, and, most importantly, of their own well-being. It wasn't about control or power. True leadership, Marcus now understood, was about listening. It was about understanding the struggles your employees faced and finding ways to alleviate those burdens. It was about creating a space where they could grow, where they could thrive without feeling that their jobs were at odds with their personal lives. And in Nia, he had found someone who embodied that kind of leadership. As he walked through the aisles, Marcus couldn't help but smile to himself. This was what he had always dreamed of for Riverdale Market. Not just a profitable business, but a place where employees felt valued and customers could see the difference in the service they received. The store was no longer just about numbers on a chart. It was about people and the community they had built together. 1 week later, Marcus returned again, this time no longer in disguise. He walked through the store with a sense of quiet satisfaction. The changes were more than visible. They were tangible. The shelves were stocked neatly, the aisles were clean, and there was a vibrancy to the place that hadn't been there before. The store had returned to its roots, and the atmosphere was one of genuine warmth. Nia was standing at the front of the store, talking to a group of employees who were huddled around, listening intently. Her voice was clear and confident as she spoke, and when she noticed Marcus, her face lit up with a smile. She walked over to him, greeting him with a firm handshake. "Marcus, it's good to see you," she said, her tone relaxed but full of gratitude. "How's everything going?" Marcus smiled back, feeling a sense of calm he hadn't felt in a long time. "It's good. It's really good. I've been watching, seeing the progress. You've done something incredible here, Nia." She shrugged modestly. It's not just me. We're all in this together. Marcus nodded, looking around the store. I can see that. You created something special here. This is the Riverdale market I've always hoped for. The pride Marcus felt in that moment wasn't just for the store. It was for the team that had made it possible. He had played a part, yes, but it was Nia's leadership that had made the difference. The work isn't done, but we're on the right track, Nia said, her voice steady and sure. I'm just getting started. Marcus paused, taking in the scene one more time. The employees were working with pride, interacting with customers, and genuinely caring about the work they were doing. This was a team that had been given the space to thrive, to rebuild, and to take ownership of their future. As Marcus left Riverdale Market that day, he felt a sense of quiet victory. The store had been transformed, but more importantly, it had begun to heal. And the future, both for the store and for the people who worked there, was brighter than it had been in a long time. If this story touched your heart, like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more powerful, soul-touching stories that restore faith in humanity.